My name is Evelyn Whitfield, and I'm 27 years old. 7 years ago, my family evacuated our house during a Category 4 hurricane. My dad loaded my mom, my brother, the photo albums, and the good silverware into 2 cars. He left me behind with 3 pets and no electricity. Before he drove away, he boarded up my bedroom window from the outside. "So, you don't get any ideas," he said. My mom took the last car without looking back. I sat in the hallway closet with a yellow flashlight, 2 dogs, and a cat, listening to the roof flex like it was breathing. I was 19. I survived. And this morning, 7 years later, my phone lit up with 53 missed calls. The first one at 7:30 was my dad. "Please stop. Don't do this." The last one at 9:30 was my mom. "We were wrong, please." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe and drop your location and local time in the comments. Now, let me take you back to the summer I turned 19, the week the sky turned green, and everything I thought I knew about my family came apart like wet cardboard. We lived in my grandmother's house. That's the part people never understand when I tell this story, so I'll say it again. The house belonged to Ruth Calloway, my mother's mother. 4 bedrooms, a screened porch, a garden full of herbs I couldn't name yet. My parents moved in when I was 6 after my father's contracting business hit a slow patch. Temporary, he told Grandma Ruth. That was 13 years ago. The kitchen table seated 4. There were 5 of us. Every night I pulled a metal folding chair from the hall closet and wedged it between the counter and my brother Jard's elbow. Nobody ever suggested buying a 5th chair. It just never came up. The way a lot of things about me never came up. Jard was 23 that summer, selling cars at a dealership on Route 12. He dropped out of community college 2 years in, tuition paid by our parents without a blink. That Tuesday night, my mother set a casserole on the table and announced that Jard had been moved to the weekend shift. She said, promoted with the same voice she'd used for a diploma. "That's my boy," my father said, squeezing Jard's shoulder. I cleared my throat. I got accepted into the plumbing apprenticeship, the one at the trade center. My mother passed the salad bowl to Jard. "That's nice, honey." My father didn't look up from his plate. The casserole had too much salt. I remember because I kept drinking water to fill the silence. At the far end of the table, Grandma Ruth set down her fork. She looked at me the way she always did, like she was reading a page nobody else could see. "Good hands run in this family," she said. My father chewed. My mother smiled at something on her phone. Jard asked if there was more bread. After dinner, I washed the dishes alone. Through the window above the sink, I could see the garden. Rosemary, thyme, sage, all planted in rows so straight they looked ruled. Grandma Ruth had a leather notebook she carried in her apron pocket. She wrote in it every evening on the porch, blue-black ink, left-handed slant. I never asked what was inside. I figured it was recipes or plant schedules or the kind of lists old women keep to remember things. I should have asked. Let me tell you about the math in my family, because it was always math. Jard's 2 years of community college cost $11,000. My parents wrote the checks from a joint account funded mostly by my father's odd contracting jobs and whatever Grandma Ruth didn't charge them in rent, which was everything. When Jard dropped out midway through his 2nd year, my father said, "At least he tried." My mother framed his 1 semester of Dean's List and hung it by the front door. My plumbing apprenticeship cost $600 in tools and a background check. I paid for both with savings from bussing tables at the diner on Orchard Street. The only thing I needed from my parents was a signature, a parental guarantee since I was under 21. I asked my father on a Sunday morning while he was reading box scores at the kitchen table. "Plumbing." He turned a page. "That's not a career, Evelyn. That's a fallback." My mother appeared in the doorway. "Honey, let her try." For 1 second, I thought she was on my side. Then she pulled me into the hallway and whispered, "Don't embarrass your father," in front of Jard. So I drove across town and asked Grandma Ruth. She read the form once, signed it, and handed it back. No speech, no hesitation. She said, "Bring your tools over Saturday. The pipe under my kitchen sink has been dripping for 2 months. I fixed that pipe the next weekend." Copper fitting, quarter-turn valve, 45 minutes. My father was in the living room watching a game. He walked through the kitchen while I was on my back under the sink, stepped over my legs, and opened the refrigerator. "You're really going to do that for a living," Jard said from the doorway, holding a soda he hadn't opened yet. I tightened the last fitting and listened. Silence. No drip. The pipe had been leaking so long that the absence of sound was louder than the water had been. "Yeah," I said, "I am." Grandma Ruth stood at the stove, heating a kettle. She didn't say anything. She just poured me a cup of tea and set it on the counter next to my wrench like the two things belonged together. That night, I found out she'd put my name down as her emergency contact on the house paperwork. I didn't know that until much later. She never mentioned it. Saturday afternoons belonged to Grandma Ruth and me. That was the deal. Unspoken. Like most good things between us, I'd come over after my morning shift. She'd hand me a pair of gardening gloves that smelled like beeswax and sage, and we'd work the herb beds until the light turned amber. She taught me the names of things, not just the common names, the real ones. Salvia azales, she'd say, snapping a sage leaf between her fingers. Aacales means of the workshop. It was medicine before it was seasoning. She was a retired nurse. She talked about plants the way she talked about people, with precision and a little bit of tenderness she'd never admit to. That particular Saturday, a week before the storm, the air was thick and sweet with jasmine from the fence line. We were on our knees in the dirt transplanting time when she said something that stuck. "Your mother was a difficult child. Not bad, difficult. She wanted things I didn't know how to give." I waited. Grandma Ruth didn't repeat herself, and she didn't elaborate unless she felt like it. "I was a fair mother," she said. "But fair isn't warm. Deanne wanted warm." I didn't know what to say, so I kept digging. She reached into her apron pocket and handed me a flashlight. Yellow plastic, heavy, the kind with the wide beam that lighthouse keepers would recognize. "Keep this." "What for?" "When the lights go out, you'll need your own light." I laughed. "Grandma, we have a generator." "The generator belongs to your father." She said it flat like a weather report. Then she smiled. "That flashlight is yours." Later, while I was rinsing the tells at the outdoor spigot, I saw her on the porch with the leather notebook open on her knee. She was writing fast, faster than recipes required. When she noticed me looking, she closed it and tucked it into her pocket. "Not yet, sweetheart." She said it the way you close a book you're not finished reading. I didn't press. I figured she'd show me when she was ready or shouldn't. And either way, she had her reasons. Grandma Ruth always had reasons. She just didn't always share them on your schedule. The sun sat low over the yard, orange and close. The kind of light that turns garden hoses to copper wire and makes even a chain-link fence look intentional. The storm had a name, but I don't use it. Names make things personal. And that hurricane wasn't personal. It was geography. What was personal was the whiteboard in the kitchen. My father bought it at a hardware store on Wednesday, 3 days before landfall. He mounted it on the wall next to the refrigerator and drew 2 columns with a black marker that squeaked on every downstroke. The left column said Car 1. The right column said Car 2. Under Car 1, Glenn Jard Documents Toolbox. Under Car 2, Diane, suitcases, photo albums, silverware set. I read the list twice, then a third time slower. The way you reread a sentence that can't possibly say what it says. My name wasn't on either column. Neither was biscuit, pepper, or moth. I found my father in the garage loading plywood into the truck bed. "What about me?" I asked. He didn't stop stacking. "Someone has to stay, Evelyn. The insurance won't cover the claim if the house is left unoccupied. It's a Category 4. This house survived Hugo." He pulled a nail from between his teeth. "You'll be fine. Take the pets to the hallway closet if it gets bad. Stay away from windows." I looked at him. Really looked. The way you look at a faucet that's been dripping so long you forgot it was broken. His hands were steady. His voice was flat. He'd already decided. Inside, my mother was folding clothes into a suitcase. I stood in the doorway. "Mom, someone has to watch the house, honey." She didn't look up. "We can't bring dogs to the hotel. You know that." I could go. Jard could stay. She zipped the suitcase. "Your brother has work Monday." As if I didn't. As if the apprenticeship I'd worked 7 months to get was a hobby, something I did between the real events of other people's lives. I walked to the back of the house. Grandma Ruth was standing in the kitchen doorway, both hands on her cane. She'd heard everything. Her jaw was set so tight I could see the muscle jumping beneath her ear. "Over my dead body," she said to Glenn as he passed through the hall. My father didn't slow down. "It's not your decision anymore, Ruth. It's my house now." Grandma Ruth straightened. Her eyes went flat and calm. The way water goes still before it freezes, that she said quietly is exactly what I'm afraid of. Nobody else heard her. I did. I heard every word, but I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. They left at 7 in the morning on Saturday. The sky was the color of a bruise, green at the edges, yellow in the center. The kind of sky that makes birds go silent. My father loaded the last box into his truck. Jard sat in the passenger seat with his earbuds in, scrolling his phone. He didn't wave. My mother helped Grandma Ruth into the backseat of the sedan. Ruth resisted. I could see it from the porch, the way she gripped the car door, the way my mother's hand pressed flat against Ruth's back, firm and final. "Mom, you can't stay, your heart." Ruth turned to look at me through the rear window. Her mouth moved. She was saying something, but the glass was up and I couldn't hear. She pressed her palm against the window. I pressed mine against the porch screen. Then the sedan backed out of the driveway and the tail lights disappeared around the bend where the road curves toward the highway. My father was last. He walked to my bedroom window with a sheet of plywood, a drill, and a box of 3-in screws. I stood inside the room and watched the daylight shrink. First to a rectangle, then to a strip, then to a crack, then to nothing. 4 screws, each one ground through the wood frame with a high, thin sound, like a fingernail on porcelain. "So, you don't get any ideas about leaving," he said through the plywood. His voice was muffled now, separated from me by 3/4 impress board, then his boots on gravel, then the truck door, then nothing. I walked to the breaker panel in the hallway because the hall light had gone out. Every switch was flipped down. My mother had cut the main power on her way to the car to protect the wiring. She'd said yesterday, but she hadn't done it yesterday. She'd done it this morning after Grandma Ruth was already in the car and couldn't argue. The house was dark, not evening dark. Sealed dark. The kind of dark where you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed until you wave your hand in front of your face. I found the yellow flashlight on my nightstand. It cut through the hallway in a hard beam. Biscuit pressed against my leg. Pepper winded from the closet. Moth sat on the kitchen counter, ears flat, watching the ceiling. At 11:14 p.m., the first gust hit. I know because my phone still had charge. 23%. I will tell you what a Category 4 hurricane sounds like from inside a dark house. It sounds like a freight train trying to clear its throat. Low first, then louder, then so loud that the sound stops being sound and becomes pressure. In your ears, your chest, the spaces behind your eyes. The hallway closet was the safest spot. No windows, interior walls on all sides. I sat on the floor with Biscuit on my left, Pepper on my right, and Moth curled in my lap. Her claws pricking my thigh every time the house groaned. The walls shuddered in long, slow waves. Somewhere above us, a roof tile tore free and skittered across the shingles like a playing card down a staircase. I called Grandma Ruth at midnight. She picked up on the first ring, "Baby." Her voice cracked on the word. "I'm okay, Grandma. I tried to stop them. I tried." I know, she was crying. I'd seen Grandma Ruth cry exactly once before when her sister passed. She cried quietly. The way people cry when they've had practice. "I'm in the closet," I told her. "Dogs are with me, Moth too." The walls are holding. She took a breath, then another. I could hear the TV behind her. The hotel weathercast, volume low. A man's voice listing wind speeds like a grocery list. "I'm going to fix this." She said, "Give me time." My phone said 9%. "I have to go, Grandma. I love you. I love you more and I love you longer." That was a thing she said. It started when I was 4 and she never stopped. I hung up and set the phone face down on the floor to save battery. In the dark, I did what you do when there's nothing to do. I breathed. I counted. I remembered. I thought about the summer I was 12 and my father spread a set of construction blueprints across the kitchen table and taught me how to read elevation lines. He was patient that afternoon. He pointed to the foundation markings and said, "This is where the house starts. Everything else stands on this." It was one of the only afternoons I could remember where he spoke to me like I was worth teaching. That was the version of my father I kept trying to find. The one who drew straight lines and explained foundations. By the time the sun rose, I understood that man wasn't missing. He was never the whole picture. The winds dropped around 4:00 a.m. I opened the closet door. Moonlight cut through the cracks in the plywood over my bedroom window. Thin white lines like bars. The house stood. The garden was flat. The power was still out. Pepper pressed his nose into my palm like he was checking if I was still real. I was barely. Something else had broken during the night, not the roof, not the walls, something deeper, more structural, more permanent. The part of me that made excuses. The pipe that had been leaking for years finally burst. And I didn't have the tools yet, but I knew I would, someday when the time was right. I want to pause here for a second. If you've ever been the one left behind, not in a storm, but in a decision, a conversation, a family plan where your name just wasn't on the list, you know what that closet feels like. It's not about the wind. It's about the silence before they drove away. If this story is hitting close, drop a comment and tell me what was your closet moment. And if you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button. This story is just getting started. They came back 2 days later after the county cleared the roads and the gas stations reopened. My father's truck pulled into the driveway first, tires crunching over fallen branches. He got out, walked past me on the porch, and went straight inside. He checked the walls. He checked the roof from the attic hatch. He ran his hand along the baseboards in the living room, crouched near the water heater, opened and closed every cabinet in the kitchen. He was conducting an inspection of the house. "House looks good," he said, coming back through the front door. "You did fine." He didn't say, "You're okay." He didn't say, "I'm sorry," or "That must have been scary," or "Let me look at you." He said, "The house looks good," like I was the night shift security guard and my report was satisfactory. My mother carried her suitcase to the bedroom. "Oh, it smells musty. We should open the windows." She said this to no one in particular. She didn't comment on the plywood still screwed over my bedroom window. She didn't ask how I'd slept, or if I'd slept, or if I'd eaten the 3 cans of cold soup I'd found in the pantry by flashlight. Jard stayed in the truck for 20 minutes looking at his phone. When he finally came in, he grabbed a soda from the fridge and went to his room. I stood in the kitchen and counted the seconds since anyone had spoken to me directly. I got to 400 before Grandma Ruth's taxi pulled up to the curb. She'd taken a cab from the hotel. $67. She hadn't asked anyone for a ride. Ruth came through the front door, walked past everyone, and found me by the sink. She wrapped her arms around me and didn't let go for a long time. She smelled like hotel soap and peppermint lozines and something older, something that was just her. Talcum and linen and thyme. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered into my hair. "Give me time." She'd said the same thing on the phone during the storm, but standing there with the sun glaring through the kitchen window so bright it hurt after 2 days of dark, the words landed differently. She wasn't making a promise out of panic. She was making a plan. I didn't ask what kind of plan. I was 19. I thought time meant things will get better eventually. I didn't know she meant it literally. That somewhere in that leather notebook, the fix was already being written. 3 months after the storm. I packed my car. It didn't take long. I owned a duffel bag of clothes, a toolbox, a yellow flashlight, 3 leashes, a cat carrier, and 6 years of knowing exactly where I stood in my family's priorities. I'd finished my plumbing apprenticeship early, top of the cohort, which surprised no one who'd ever watched me work and surprised everyone who'd never bothered to. A company in Millbury, the next town over, hired me at $19 an hour plus benefits. I found a studio apartment above a hardware store in Elm Street. $470 a month, pets allowed, leaky faucet in the kitchen. Perfect. Moving day was a Thursday. My mother stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, watching me carry boxes past her. "You're being dramatic, Evelyn." "I'm being employed," I said. "There's a difference." My father was on the couch watching a preseason game. He didn't get up. "You'll be back in a month," he said to the television. "Mark my words." Jard wasn't home. He'd switched to the evening shift, or he was avoiding the moment. Same result either way. I loaded Biscuit and Pepper into the back seat. Moth went in her carrier on the passenger side, yowling like I was driving her to the vet. Then I went back inside one more time. Grandma Ruth was in the garden deadheading marigolds. I hugged her and she held my face in both hands, her palms rough from 50 years of work, warm from the sun. "Call me every Sunday," she said. Every Sunday. "And fix that faucet in your new kitchen before the drip drives you crazy." I laughed. "Yes, ma'am." She tucked something into my jacket pocket. A sprig of dried sage from her garden tied with kitchen string. "For the new place," she said. "Sage survives anything." That first night in the apartment, I lay on an air mattress on the floor and listened to the silence. No father's footsteps overhead, no mother's sighing through the walls, no brother's music bleeding through the ceiling, just me, 2 dogs breathing, a cat kneading the blanket, and a faucet dripping in the kitchen. I fixed the faucet at 11 p.m. quarter-turn valve, same as Grandma's. The wrench echoed in the empty room because there was no furniture to absorb the sound. It felt like a prayer. Small, private, answered only by silence. But the drip stopped and that was enough. 3 years passed. I turned 22. I'd been promoted twice, lead plumber on residential jobs, then commercial. I had a truck with my name on the magnetic sign, a toolbox worth more than my father's truck, and a 1-bedroom apartment I'd moved in after the studio's landlord sold the building. Biscuit was getting old and slow. Pepper had gray around his muzzle. Moth ruled the apartment from the top of the bookshelf like a furry dictator. Life was small and mine, and I liked it that way. I called Grandma Ruth every Sunday. She told me about her garden, her books, her neighbor Connie's hip replacement. She never mentioned the leather notebook. She never mentioned my parents. I didn't ask. Then the letter arrived. It came to my old studio address and was forwarded twice before it reached me. A white envelope, thin with a blue logo in the corner I didn't recognize. The return address said Eastern Mutual Insurance Claims Division. I opened it, standing at my kitchen counter, still wearing my work boots. "Dear Ms. Whitfield, thank you for your participation in claim number 4471, B regarding hurricane damage to the property at 114 Sycamore Lane. This letter confirms the settlement of $47,000 dispersed to the primary policy holder, Glenn R. Whitfield." I read it again, then a third time. Then I set the letter on the counter and put both hands flat on the surface because the floor felt uneven, though it wasn't. I had never filed an insurance claim. I had never signed anything related to 114 Sycamore Lane. I had been 19 years old, sitting in a closet with a dying phone and 3 animals while the house tried to shake itself apart. I called the insurance company. The representative was polite, efficient, and entirely unhelpful until I said, "I need to see the claim form with my name on it." It arrived by email 3 days later. There it was, my full name, my signature on a line that read, "Witness at station. Confirms occupant was present and took reasonable measures to protect property during named storm event." The signature wasn't mine. It was close. Someone had practiced. $47,000. That's what my night in the dark was worth to my father. Not my safety, my signature. I didn't call Glenn. I didn't call Diane. I picked up the phone and called Grandma Ruth. She answered on the first ring. Before I could say anything, she said, "I know," Marshall told me. "We're already working on it." Marshall Raines had an office on the 2nd floor of a brick building downtown above a barber shop that had been there since the Korean War. The stairwell smelled like aftershave and old wood. His door had frosted glass with gold lettering M. Raines, Esquire, Estate and Probate. He was 62, silver-haired with reading glasses he adjusted every time he changed subjects. His desk was clean except for a coffee mug, a lamp, and a manila envelope thick enough to prop open a door. "Your grandmother was the most deliberate woman I've ever worked with," he said, leaning back in his chair. "She came to see me 2 months after the storm, October 14th. I remember because she brought me a jar of fig preserves, and she never brought gifts unless she was about to ask for something complicated." Ruth had changed her will. The house 114 Sycamore Lane, the garden, the land beneath it, would go entirely to me. Not to Diane, not shared. Mine. She was very specific. Marshall said she dictated the language herself. I've been practicing law for 34 years, and your grandmother's instructions were clearer than most attorneys' briefs. He opened the manila envelope and slid a photocopy across the desk. 2 witness signatures at the bottom. Constance, Pastor David Grimes, dated October 14th, 3 years prior. She also asked me to keep copies of the insurance claim your father filed. He adjusted his glasses. She obtained them through a public records request. Your grandmother understood paperwork the way a surgeon understands anatomy. She knew about the forged signature. She suspected it immediately. She asked me to verify, which I did. I stared at the documents. The ceiling fan turned slowly, stirring air that smelled like old coffee and wood polish. On the wall behind Marshall, a framed photo showed a younger version of himself standing next to Grandma Ruth at some kind of community event. Both of them were half smiling, the way people do when they trust each other enough to skip the full performance. "Why didn't she report it?" I asked. Marshall took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "She told me, if I go after Glenn now, Diane will cut me off from Evelyn. I'll lose them both." She chose to wait. He put his glasses back on. She said, "Not yet. When I'm gone, Evelyn will need this more than I do." The fan clicked on every rotation. I counted 3 clicks before I could speak again. She planned all of this. She didn't plan it. Marshall said she prepared for it. There's a difference. My mother called on a Wednesday. That alone should have told me something. Deanne Whitfield didn't make midweek phone calls unless she needed something. Birthdays, holidays, and favors. That was her rotation. I was thinking we could have lunch, she said. Her voice had a warmth I hadn't heard in years. It sounded almost real. Almost. "Lunch," I said. "The diner on Orchard, Saturday, my treat." I should have said no. Marshall's documents were fresh in my mind. The manila envelope still sitting on my kitchen table. I knew what my father had done. I knew what my mother had allowed. But there is a thing that happens when the person who hurt you offers you a crumb of what you've been starving for. You reach for it, even when you know the hand might close. I said yes. The diner smelled like apple pie and industrial coffee. Diane was already seated in a booth by the window, napkin in her lap, menu untouched. She stood when she saw me and hugged me briefly, carefully. The way you hug someone when you're not sure they want to be touched. "You look good," she said. "Strong. I carry pipes for a living." She almost laughed. Then she folded her hands on the table and looked at me with an expression I'd been waiting for since I was 6 years old. "I should have stayed with you that night, Evelyn. During the storm, I should have fought harder." Mitch's tightened. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to so badly that I could feel the want like a physical thing pressing against the inside of my ribs. We ordered. She asked about my apartment, my work, my dogs. She said, "That's wonderful." 4 times. She complimented my truck. She asked about a scar on my hand from a copper fitting that slipped. The first time she'd ever noticed a mark on my body that wasn't there at birth. Then, between her second cup of coffee and the check. She stirred in 2 sugars and said, "Your grandmother's been looking so tired lately. I worry about her health. Have you talked to her much about the house or anything like that?" 3 stirs. She always stirred 3 times when she was circling the thing she actually wanted to say. I looked at her across the table. My mother, 51 years old, with reading glasses pushed up on her head and a question she was trying to make sound casual. She wasn't apologizing. She was gathering intelligence. "We talk about her garden mostly," I said. Diane nodded slowly. The check came. She paid. She hugged me again at the door, and this time the hug lasted longer as if she was measuring something. I sat in my truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes. Engine off, hands on the wheel. The pie had been good. The conversation had been a performance. The calls came from Connie Beale, Grandma Ruth's next-door neighbor for 40 years. Connie was 58, retired from the post office, and had the kind of voice that made bad news sound like a weather advisory. Serious but steady. "Your father's been coming around." Connie said coming around 3 times this week. He sits at Ruth's kitchen table with a folder. Last time I heard him through the screen door. He's asking her to sign something Something about the house deed. Glenn wanted co-ownership. His pitch was practical. The house needed roof work, foundation reinforcement, the kind of expensive maintenance that a woman Ruth's age couldn't manage alone. He'd handle it. All she had to do was add his name to the title. For tax purposes, he'd told her. What did Grandma say? I asked. She said no 3 times. She's polite about it, but she said no. That should have been the end of it. But Glenn Whitfield didn't hear no. He heard not yet. What he did next was quieter and uglier. Connie told me the following week. Glenn had been talking to people in town, at the hardware store, at the church breakfast. Nothing overt, just comments. Ruth's been forgetting things. She left the stove on last Tuesday. We're worried about her. Honestly, it's hard to watch. None of it was true. Ruth Calloway could recite her medications, her social security number, and every plant in her garden in Latin. She'd organized her own tax returns for 60 years. She read a novel a week and beat Connie at Scrabble every Thursday. But reputation in a small town is like wallpaper. Easy to hang, hard to strip. And Glenn was hanging at one conversation at a time. I called Grandma Ruth that night. Sheensword on the second ring mid-sentence with someone on the other line, switched over clean and recited exactly what she'd had for dinner. Baked chicken, roasted carrots, a glass of wine. She'd been reading a biography of Florence Nightingale. Your father is getting desperate, she said, calm as bathwater. I could hear a page turning on her end of the line. She was still reading while she talked to me. That means we're close. Close to what? Close to done. She didn't elaborate. She asked me about a job I was running, a bathroom retrofit in a Victorian on Maple Street. She wanted to know about the pipe material. We talked about copper versus PEX for 15 minutes. She never sounded afraid, not once. I visited Grandma Ruth for Christmas. The house smelled the way it always did in December. Pine from the wreath on the door, cinnamon from something on the stove, and underneath it all the permanent bass note of her home. Old wood, lemon oil, and the faintest trace of lavender sachets kept in every drawer. We sat on the back porch with tea. The garden was dormant, just brown stems and mulch. But the sage was still green. It didn't care about winter. Grandma Ruth said it never did. I wasn't a warm mother, she said, staring at the garden with her mug cupped in both hands. I've told you that before, but I need you to understand it now. Your mother wanted something I didn't know how to give. She was a child who needed praise, and I was a woman who believed praise should be earned. She sipped her tea. I was wrong about that. Not entirely, but enough. Grandma, I'm not finished. She set down the mug. Your mother married your father because he told her she was special every day out loud. I never did that. So when she had to choose between his voice and mine, she chose his. And I can't blame her for it entirely because I created the silence she was trying to fill. The wind picked up. Dead leaves scraped across the porch boards in a thin, dry whisper. But understanding someone, Ruth said, is not the same as excusing them. Don't hate your mother, but don't trust her either. She reached under her chair and pulled out the leather notebook. I hadn't seen it in years. The cover was darker now, soft with handling, and there was a rubber band holding it shut. When the time comes, give this to Marshall. He'll know what to do with it. When what time comes, she looked at me. Her eyes were clear, sharp, completely present. I'm 81 years old, sweetheart. The time comes whether you name it or not. I took the notebook. It was heavier than I expected, dense with pages, with years, with everything she'd been recording in that left-handed slant. At the front door, she hugged me longer than usual, tighter than usual. I could feel her collar bone through her sweater. You're the best thing I ever did right, she said, even if I did it late. I drove home with the notebook on the passenger seat and the heater running and a feeling in my chest, like holding a door that was about to close. Marshall called on a Tuesday in March. I was under a kitchen sink in a duplex on the east side replacing a garbage disposal when my phone rang. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I slid out from under the cabinet, wiped my hands on my jeans, and answered, Evelyn. His voice was the same as always, measured, precise, but there was a weight in it that hadn't been there before. Your grandmother passed this morning. In her sleep, Connie found her. I sat on the kitchen floor of Astranger's duplex and stared at the underside of their sink. A cobweb hung from the P-trap. The disposal hummed faintly because I hadn't finished disconnecting the power. "Evelyn, are you there? I'm here. I wanted you to hear it from me first." First, before Diane, before Glenn, before anyone else who might deliver the news wrapped in their own agenda. Marshall understood the hierarchy. I drove to the house. Connie was on the porch with a glass of water she wasn't drinking, her eyes red. She'd let herself in with the spare key Ruth had given her years ago, just in case. Ruth was in bed, covers pulled up, one hand resting on a closed book. The room smelled like peppermint and beeswax, the way it always had, the way it always would until someone opened the windows and let the world in. Biscuit had walked over from Connie Uncas' house. She'd been watching him that week while Ruth had a cold. He lay under the bed and wouldn't come out. I sat in the chair beside the bed. I didn't cry. I don't mean I was strong. I mean the feeling was too big for crying. It filled every part of me and left no room for anything to escape. 2 hours later, my father called. "Your grandmother left some paperwork. We need to sort the house situation. When's a good time? Not, 'I'm sorry for your loss,' not, 'Are you okay?' Not even. She was a good woman." He went straight to the paperwork, the house, the asset. Diane called 30 minutes after that. "I'm devastated," she said, and I believed her about that one thing. Then, "Has anyone mentioned a will?" I looked at the leather notebook on Ruth's nightstand next to a glass of water and a pencil with a chewed eraser. The curtain moved in the draft lace. She'd had those curtains since before I was born. That night, I opened the leather notebook for the first time. Ruth Calloway wrote the way she spoke, clean, direct, and without a wasted word. The notebook was organized by date, entry after entry in blue-black ink, left-handed slant, each one beginning with a number and a month. She'd recorded everything. September 14th. Glenn told Evelyn she had to stay during the storm. Diane did not object. Jard said nothing. September 15th. Glenn boarded Evelyn's window from outside. I was in Diane's car. I could not stop it. September 15th, 11:40 p.m. Evelyn called. She was in the closet. She was calm. I was not. The entries continued after the storm. Dates, times, observations. Written with the precision of a woman who'd spent 40 years charting patient vitals. October 3rd, Glenn filed insurance claim. Told the adjuster someone was in the house during the storm. Used Evelyn's name. October 8th, asked Marshall to pull the claim form. Signature is not Evelyn's. October 14th. New will signed. Connie and Pastor Grimes witnessed. Marshall filed. Then the entries shifted. Visits from Glenn. Conversations with Diane. Things Ruth overheard when people forgot she was in the room or assumed she wasn't listening. January 12th. Glenn told Bill Hayward at the hardware store that I left the stove on. I have not used the stove burner in 3 weeks. I used the microwave. March 5th. Diane asked me about the house deed. I said nothing. She asked again. I said nothing louder. The last dated entry was from 3 weeks before Ruth died. February 22nd. I am tired, but the notebook is finished. Marshall has what he needs. Evelyn has what she'll need. I did not do this out of anger. I did it because someone should have been counting and nobody was. So I counted. On the final page, folded once and tucked between the cardboard backing and the leather cover, was a letter handwritten. Same ink. "Dear Evelyn, you deserved better. Now you'll have it. Don't be kind to people who weren't kind to you. Be fair. There's a difference. The house is yours, not because you earned it. You did, but that's not why. It's yours because I trust you to take care of what I couldn't protect while I was alive. I'm sorry it took me so long. Grandma Ruth, I read that letter 4 times. Be fair, not be kind. It took me until the 3rd reading to understand the difference. Kindness can be performed. Fairness requires evidence. I picked up the phone and called Marshall. I'm ready, I said. Marshall scheduled the reading for 2 weeks after the funeral. He sent formal notices, certified mail, return receipt requested to Glenn, Diane, and Jard at their current addresses. He sent mine by email with a brief note. Wear comfortable shoes. These things can take a while. The funeral itself was small. Grandma Ruth had left instructions for that, too. No viewing, no eulogy longer than 5 minutes, no lees because she hated the smell. Connie spoke. Pastor Grimes read a psalm. I sat in the second row and watched my mother cry into a tissue she'd prefolded in her purse. My father sat with his arms crossed. His jaw moved slightly the way it did when he was calculating. He didn't cry. He shook hands afterward with people he hadn't spoken to in years, and I overheard him tell one of them, "Shell lived a good long life. Now we just need to settle the estate." At the reception, potato salad, cold cuts, and sweet tea in the church basement. Glenn pulled me aside near the coat rack. "Evelyn, listen. I know your grandmother and I had our differences, but I think we can handle this like a family. No lawyers, no drama. She would have wanted it simple." She hired a lawyer. "Dad, Marshall, he's a friend. That's different. He's her attorney of record. It's not different." Glenn's mouth tightened. He adjusted his collar. "Fine, we'll do it Marshall's way, but this is going to be straightforward. Your mother is the next of kin." I nodded. I didn't correct him. Correcting him would have been a kindness, and Grandma Ruth had taught me the difference. The week before the reading, I sat in Marshall's office while he walked me through the documents one final time. The will was airtight. 2 witnesses notarized filed with the county clerk. Ruth's instructions were specific down to the punctuation. She also left a letter to be read aloud during the session. Marshall said a separate document from the one in the notebook. Short. She wanted everyone to hear it. "What does it say?" He shook his head. "I've been instructed to read it only in the presence of all parties. I bought a blazer that weekend. Charcoal gray fitted on clearance at a department store in M. Barry. It was the first blazer I'd ever owned. Not because I needed armor, because Grandma Ruth would have wanted me to walk into that room like I owned it because I was about to. The night before the reading, I sat in my apartment and looked at the documents spread across the kitchen table. The will, the insurance claim, the notebook, the letter, Marshall's card. Is this revenge? I'd asked him the previous week. He adjusted his glasses. It's a state law, he said. Revenge is just a side effect. The call started 3 days before the reading. Tuesday night, 8:00 p.m. Glenn's number. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. "Honey, let's talk about this as a family. There's no reason to make this a legal thing. Your grandmother would have wanted us to stay together." Wednesday morning, 6:30. Glenn again. I picked up this time because the caller ID startled me awake. "Evelyn, I don't know what Marshall told you, but lawyers complicate things. They cost money. You're 26. You don't know how these things work. I know how a forged signature works." "Silence then. I don't know what you're talking about." "Okay, Dad, I'm your father. Don't make me the bad guy here." As if being the bad guy was something I was doing to him and not something he'd built for himself. One decision at a time over the course of 7 years. Thursday evening, Diane's number. She was crying before I said hello. Real tears. I could hear the catch in her breath, the way it stuttered between syllables. Diane's fake crying was smooth and controlled. This was rough. This was fear. "If you take that house," she said, "you're taking everything your father has left. We've been living there for 13 years, Evelyn. Where are we supposed to go?" I stood at my kitchen window. The apartment's radiator ticked. Outside, a street light buzzed with a loose filament. On the television, muted. A weather forecast showed a tropical system forming in the Atlantic. The meteorologist pointed at a swirling mass of white. The irony was not lost on me. "Mom, you lived in Grandma's house for free for 13 years. It was our home. It was her home. She let you stay. That's Evelyn. That's not how family works. That's exactly how property law works." She cried harder. I stood there and let the silence stretch. Part of me, the old part, the part that used to pull the folding chair up to the table without being asked, wanted to say it was okay, wanted to say we'd figure something out. Wanted to reach for the crumb one more time. Then I remembered the whiteboard, car 1, car 2, no column for Evelyn, and the sound of 4 screws going into the window frame, one after another while my father sealed mainsight and walked away. "I'll see you at the reading, Mom." I hung up. The radiator ticked. Pepper put his head on my foot. The weather forecast changed to a car commercial, and I turned the TV off. Connie Beale called me on Friday morning, 2 days before the reading. Her voice had a tremor in it. Not weakness, but the kind of vibration that comes from holding something in for years and finally deciding to let it out. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I should have said it a long time ago, and I didn't, and that's on me." I sat down at my kitchen table. "Okay." The morning of the storm. I was on my porch. I'd gone out to check my shutters, and I saw your father at your bedroom window with the plywood and the drill. I watched him screw that board into the frame. 4 screws, I counted. You saw him. I saw him and I heard him. He said something through the wood. I couldn't make it out from my yard, but the way he said it, like he was talking to a dog he didn't want to chase. Her voice cracked. I went back inside. I told myself it wasn't my family. It wasn't my business. And I've been sick about it ever since. I looked at the ceiling. A water stain shaped like a kidney bean marked the corner where the upstairs neighbor's shower leaked. I'd offered to fix it twice. He'd said no twice. Some people would rather live with the damage than let someone help. Why now, Connie? Because of the funeral, your father stood in that church and didn't shed a single tear. And when he shook my hand outside, he said, well, at least we can finally sort out the house. That's what he said. At your grandmother's funeral. At my best friend's funeral. She blew her nose. I waited. Your grandmother asked me to witness the new will. October 14th at Marshall's office. I signed it. Pastor Grimes signed it. She told me, if I don't do this now, Connie, I'll lose her. Connie paused. I didn't know if she meant the house or you. Maybe both. Are you coming to their raiding? Wild horses, sweetheart. I'm one of the witnesses, Marshall already confirmed. After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. I thought about Connie on her porch that morning, watching, counting screws, then going back inside. I thought about all the people who see things and say nothing because it's not their family, not their house, not their window being sealed shut. Then I thought about the ones who eventually come back. It doesn't erase the years, but it matters. Late is better than silent. Sunday night. The reading was Monday at 10:00 a.m. I spread everything across the kitchen table. The will photocopied, the insurance documents, the leather notebook, rubber band removed, spine cracked, Marshall's card, a legal pad where I'd written nothing because there was nothing left to plan. Moth jumped onto the table and sat on the notebook as cats do, positioning herself on the one thing that mattered most, like she knew. I let her stay. The apartment was quiet. Biscuit snored on his bed by the radiator. He was 10 now, deaf in one ear with a hip that clicked when he climbed the stairs. Pepper had passed the year before. Cancer quick, 2 weeks from diagnosis to the end. I'd held him at the vet's office while the doctor administered the injection, and I didn't cry until I got home and his water bowl was still full. I didn't think about Pepper tonight. Tonight was about what came next. The yellow flashlight sat on the bookshelf above the TV. I'd changed the batteries on scene 7 years. It still worked. Grandma Ruth bought things that lasted. I picked it up, turned it on, and pointed it at the ceiling. The beam was steady and wide, the same beam that had cut through the hallway closet while the hurricane screamed outside. I turned it off and set it back. I thought about a question that had been circling my head all week. Am I doing this because Grandma wanted me to, or because I need to answer came in Ruth's voice or the version of her voice I carried? It doesn't matter, both are true. I called Marshall. Anything I should know, wear comfortable shoes, he said, and bring the notebook just in case of what? In case your father tries to argue the will was drafted under duress. The notebook is Ruth's own record. It won't have legal standing as evidence, but it has moral standing. And moral standing is what changes the air in a room. I set the phone down. I turned off the kitchen light. The apartment went dark, not sealed. Dark, not storm dark, choice dark. The street light outside painted a yellow stripe across the floor, warm and steady. The last time I sat in the dark, someone else decided for me. Tonight I turned off the light myself. Marshall's office looked different on a Monday morning. Cleaner, sharper. The frosted glass caught the sunlight and threw patterns on the hallway floor. The barber shop below was closed. It was their day off. And the building was silent except for the clock on Marshall's wall, ticking with the kind-of precision that made you aware of every second. 6 chairs around a rectangular table. Marshall sat at the head. I sat on his left with Connie beside me. She wore a blue cardigan and held her purse in her lap with both hands like she was bracing for turbulence. Glenn arrived first, 5 minutes early, in a sport coat I'd never seen before and shoes that were recently polished. He sat down across from me, pulled his chair forward and placed both hands on the table, palms down, fingers spread. A man claiming territory. Diane came next. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were puffy and her blouse was buttoned wrong at the collar, one hole off, so the whole thing sat slightly crooked. She sat next to Glenn without a word. Jard arrived last 4 minutes late in a wrinkled polo shirt and jeans. He took the chair at the far end of the table as far from everyone as the room allowed. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He looked at his hands. Glenn glanced at Connie. "Why is she here?" "Mrs. Beale is a witness to the will," Marshall said. "I didn't know there were witnesses. There are always witnesses. Mr. Whitfield. That's how wills work." Marshall opened a folder. The documents inside were printed on heavy paper, the kind that holds ink differently, that feels permanent when you touch it. He arranged them in front of himself, adjusted his glasses, and began. The first section was personal property, furniture, the old sedan, some jewelry split evenly between Diane and me. Glenn's name appeared nowhere. His jaw shifted, but he stayed quiet. "So far, so good," he muttered to Diane. Marshall turned the page. The fluorescent light above the table hummed. A thin, steady vibration like a tuning fork pressed against bone. Connie's hands tightened on her purse. Diane's misaligned button caught the light. "The following pertains to the real property at 114 Sycamore Lane." Marshall said the room changed. Not the temperature, not the light, the air itself. The way a room changes when everyone in it stops breathing at the same time. Marshall read the next paragraph. My father's face didn't change at first. Then it did. "I, Ruth Elaine Calloway, being of sound mind and body, do hereby bequeath the real property at 114 Sycamore Lane, including the land, structure, and all permanent fixtures, solely and entirely to my granddaughter, Evelyn Grace Whitfield." The words hung in the air like smoke. Glenn looked at Diane. Diane looked at Marshall. Jard looked at the table. Connie looked at me. I looked at me hands. They were steady. Grandma Ruth's hands had been steady, too, the day she signed this. "This is insane," Glenn said. He stood up, his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. A long, ugly sound like a groan. She was confused. She was 80 years old. She didn't know what she was signing. Mrs. Calloway was examined by her primary care physician 3 days prior to signing, Marshall said, not raising his voice. Dr. Harmon certified her mental capacity in writing. The will was witnessed by Mrs. Bale and Pastor Grimes, both of whom confirmed she was alert, oriented, and uncoerced. "I don't care about there is also a letter," Marshall continued, "that Mrs. Calloway instructed me to read aloud in the presence of all parties." He unfolded a single sheet of paper. The same blue-black ink, the same left-handed slant. "To my family," Marshall read, "I am writing this because some things need to be said out loud, even if I am no longer in the room to say them. On September 15th, my son-in-law Glenn left my granddaughter alone in this house during a Category 4 hurricane. He boarded up her bedroom window from the outside. My daughter Diane drove the last car and did not object. Evelyn sat in a closet with 3 animals and a flashlight I gave her while the roof shook and the power was already cut. Diane covered her mouth, her shoulders folded inward. I gave Evelyn this house." Marshall continued reading. "Because a family that leaves a child in a storm does not deserve the shelter that child protected." Glenn sat back down slowly like a man realizing the chair might not hold him. "There's also the matter," Marshall said, closing the letter and reaching for a second folder of an insurance claim filed under Evelyn's name without her knowledge or consent. Claim number 4471B, $47,000 dispersed to Glenn Whitfield. The signature on the witness attestation form does not match Evelyn's known signature. Glenn's face went the color of wet cement. Jard's head came up for the first time. He stared at his father, something shifted in his expression. Not surprise, exactly, recognition, the look of a person who always suspected but never confirmed. Grandma Ruth wrote that letter in blue-black ink, the same pen she used for everything, for grocery lists, garden schedules, and justice. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She just wrote it down and made sure the right people were in the room. I need to catch my breath here. If you're still with me, thank you. I know this is heavy. If Grandma Ruth reminds you of someone in your life, someone who saw you when no one else bothered to look, I'd love to hear about them. Leave their name in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. And if you want to know what happened next, the part about the house, the insurance money, and what my father did when he walked out of that room, stay with me. We're almost there. The room was quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. Then I reached into my bag and placed a single key on the table between us. Silver, worn with a piece off masking tape on the grip that still said Ruth in faded marker. This is my house now. I said you have 30 days to move out. That's the legal notice period. Marshall will send the formal letter this afternoon. Glenn leaned forward. You can't do this. She can. Marshall said, and the notice will be formalized in writing by end of business today. This house, I maintain that house. I kept the roof on. I kept the yard. You lived there rent-free for 13 years. I said in a house that was never yours while telling people the owner was losing her mind. His mouth opened, then closed. The sport coat suddenly looked too big on him. I kept my voice level. Grandma Ruth had never raised hers. I wouldn't either. About the insurance claim, I said. I didn't file it. I didn't sign it. The signature isn't mine. You have two choices. Return the $47,000 to Southeastern Mutual voluntarily, or I file a fraud report. Those are the options. Glenn's hand trembled on the table. Not rage, something worse, the slow arrival off consequence. Deanne looked at me. Her mascara had run in two thin lines down her cheeks, the wrong buttoned blouse, the puffy eyes. She looked like a woman standing in the wreckage of something she helped build. I'm your mother, she said. I know, I said. That's why this hurts. I didn't say which part. I didn't need to. Jard spoke for the first time. His voice was quiet, rough at the edges. I'm sorry, Evelyn. I looked at my brother, the one who'd sat in the truck scrolling his phone while our father sealed my window shut. The one who'd never called during the storm. The one who I now knew from the insurance documents had signed his own name on the claim form as co-witness. I know you're sorry, I said, but sorry doesn't give me back that night. Glenn stood. He didn't look at me, didn't look at Marshall, didn't look at anyone. He pulled his jacket straight, walked to the door, and closed it behind him. Not a slam, a slow, deliberate pull as if he was trying to preserve some dignity he'd already lost. The handle clicked, the fluorescent light hummed. Connie exhaled. Diane stayed in her chair, staring at the key on the table. Marshall gathered his papers. I'll prepare the formal notices this afternoon. I nodded. I picked up the key, put it back in my bag, and stood. My grandmother's house, my door, my terms. I slept that night. Not well, not long, but I slept. The first dreamless sleep I'd had since Grandma Ruth died. Moth lay across my chest like a sandbag, and Biscuit snored at the foot of the bed with his bad hip stretched out sideways. I woke at 6:45, made coffee, fed the animals, opened the blinds. Then I checked my phone. 53 missed calls. The first came at 7:30 a.m. the previous evening while I was still driving home from Marshall's office. Glenn, no voicemail. He'd called 9 more times by midnight, then 3 more between midnight and 5:00 a.m. at 7:30 this morning, almost exactly 24 hours after his first call. He'd left a voicemail. His voice sounded like a tire losing air. Please stop. Don't do this. We can work something out. I know I made mistakes. Just call me back, Evelyn, please. Jard's calls started at 8. He left one message at 8:15. Can we talk? I didn't know about the insurance thing. I swear I didn't know what I was signing. Dad said it was routine. I set the phone down when he said that. Routine. As if forging your sister's name on a federal insurance document was something you did between oil changes. Diane's call came at 9:30. One call, one voicemail. Her voice was thin and cracked like paper held too close to a flame. We were wrong, please. The recording cut out. She'd either hung up or the voicemail timer ran out. Either way, the sentence ended where the air did. I listened to every message. All 53 contact attempts, the calls, the voicemails, the silence of the ones that rang and rang. Then I set the phone face down on the counter, refilled my coffee, and watched the morning light come through the kitchen window. The window was open. My window, no plywood, no screws, just glass and screen, and the smell of April, cut grass and damp concrete, and a neighbor's grill starting up too early. I picked up the phone one more time and called Marshall. "Good morning, Evelyn. Send the 30-day notice, already drafted. I'll file it by noon. Thank you, Marshall. Don't thank me. Thank your grandmother." Biscuit padded into the kitchen and sat at my feet, looking up with that expression old dogs get. Patient, accepting, entirely present. Is scratched behind his good ear. He closed his eyes. Connie called at 10. "How are you feeling? Like the storm finally passed," I said. She laughed softly. Your grandmother would have said the same thing. She would have exactly the same thing in exactly the same voice. 1 month later, I unlocked the front door of 114 Sycamore Lane with the key that still had Ruth written on the masking tape. I didn't replace the tape. I just added my name underneath in pencil. The two names fit. Glenn and Diane had moved out the previous week. They'd rented a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, $720 a month, no pets, street parking. Glenn paid the first month from what was left of his savings after writing a check to Southeastern Mutual for $47,000. He'd chosen voluntary repayment over a fraud investigation. Marshall called it the rational decision. I called it the minimum. Jard had moved out separately. He'd found a studio near the dealership, stopped speaking to Glenn entirely, and sent me a text that said, "I know it's not enough, but I'm trying." I didn't respond. Not because I was punishing him, because I didn't know what to say yet. Some answers need more than 30 days. The house was emptier than I expected. They'd taken everything that wasn't bolted down. Furniture, curtains, the kitchen clock, but they'd left the things that mattered because they didn't know what mattered. The herb garden was still there, overgrown but alive. The porch swing still creaked in the same key. The linen closet still smelled like lavender sachets. I started with the kitchen sink. The pipe I'd fixed at 17. The one Grandma Ruth had called me over to repair was leaking again. Different fitting this time. I replaced the whole assembly. Copper to PEX, new shutoff valve, silicone seal. 2 hours, professional grade. The bedroom was harder. I stood in front of the window. My old window, the one Glenn had boarded shut. The plywood was long gone, removed after the storm, but the screw holes were still there, 4 of them. I ran my finger over each one, feeling the rough edge where the wood had splintered under the drill. I sanded the frame, filled the holes with wood putty, repainted it white, a clean, bright white, the kind that looks like intention. Then I opened the window and left it open. That evening, Connie walked over with a blackberry pie and a bottle of wine. "Welcome home, sweetheart," she said. I set the leather notebook on the bookshelf in the living room. Next to it, the yellow flashlight side by side like 2 volumes of the same story. I didn't need the flashlight in the dark anymore, but I kept it where I could see it. Some things you keep, not because you need them, but because they remind you of who held them first. It's October now, 7 months since the reading. The sage in Grandma Ruth's garden survived the summer. Drought, heat, 2 weeks when I forgot to water because I was running a commercial job in Millbury. It didn't care. Sage doesn't ask permission to keep living. It just does. I'm sitting on the back porch in the same chair Ruth sat in the Christmas she gave me the notebook. The tea is peppermint, her brand from the tin she kept above the stove. The tin is almost empty. I'll buy more next week or I'll switch to chamomile. The ritual matters more than the flavor. Biscuit is at my feet. He's 11 now, mostly deaf, and his hips are bad enough that I carry him up the porch steps. He doesn't mind. He sleeps in a patch of sun that hits the boards at 4 in the afternoon, the same patch Ruth used to read in. Moth sits on the porch railing, watching a squirrel with the patience of a tenor predator. Pepper is gone, has been for 1.5 years. I planted rosemary where I buried him near the fence line. It bloomed in June. People ask me if I forgive my parents. I don't know yet. Forgiveness is a big word for a Tuesday afternoon. My mother sent a Christmas card last year. Just her name. No message. I didn't respond, but I didn't throw it away either. It sits in the kitchen drawer with the rubber bands and the spare batteries. Some things you keep in a drawer until you know what to do with them. My father hasn't called since the 30-day notice expired. Jard called once in August to tell me he'd quit the dealership and enrolled in a trade program. Electrical. I'm learning to wire things properly, he said. I almost laughed. Almost. The sun is low now, dropping behind the tree line, turning the garden hose to copper and the herb beds to shadow. The sky is the same orange. It was the afternoon. Grandma Ruth handed me the flashlight and said, "When the lights go out, you'll need your own light." My phone buzzes on the armrest. Unknown number. I look at it for a moment, then set it back down. I'll answer when I'm ready. On my time in my house with the door wide open and every window I own, letting in whatever light there is. I used to sit in the dark because someone turned off the light. Now I sit on the porch because the sunset's worth watching. Thank you for staying with me through this one. If you've ever had to draw a line with the people who were supposed to protect you, I see you. And if you haven't yet, but you're thinking about it, trust me, you're braver than you know. Drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done? Would you have answered that call? I read every single one. If this story meant something to you, check the description below. There's another one down there that hit me even harder than this one.